Disclose, if you're there and you're there on behalf of the municipality, disclose who you are. Transparency. Take care to protect the municipality and yourself with what you post. And, you know, we can say this till we're blue in the face, but use common sense. I grew up in the city. I mean, common sense was ingrained in us. When you crossed the street, you looked both ways. And my kids were little, because they grew up on a farm, I would tell their friends' parents if they'd go into town, my kids live on a farm, they're not used to crossing the street. And that was the truth. I mean, yes, we'd go into Philly or we'd go here and go there, and I tell them to look both ways, but it wasn't a constant daily habit. And you know, the habits are what creates common sense. So it's interesting that there's a lot of things that we don't know, that we assume are common sense, that sometimes we have to train people on. And then, of course, you always have to address the First Amendment rights in using public versus private social media profiles. And there's always, when people post the disclaimer, and that's fine, but we just have to be very mindful that a disclaimer is the virtual equivalent of having a t-shirt or sign hung around your neck that says, you know, I have an opinion, but it doesn't mean anything if you want to fire me. You know, it's just like, if somebody posts something, people have and will be fired for what they post. I'm sure you've seen examples. Has anybody had that happen in their community? Schools? Oh, I have some good examples of that. First Amendment does not apply to employers. In Pennsylvania, it's an at-will state. How many of you deal with the employment issues within your entities? So just a couple of you. So you would be aware of these, but you know, at-will is important. One exception, of course, is the NLRB relates to posting about work or work-related matters that relate to protected concerted activity. Important to be aware of this. Again, this is when you get your solicitors involved. If you think you need to remove someone because they violated your policy or done something online that is egregious and we are an at-will state, that's when, of course, the solicitor gets called in. So here's some interesting examples. School administrator roasts a kid on Twitter, promptly gets fired. The kid put their school, close school tomorrow, please. And then the administrator put, but then how would you learn how to spell tomorrow? I would have probably done the same thing, by the way, because I think that was common sense. But that's my opinion. They saw it as publicly shaming a student. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we all have our opinions, but I'm sharing with you the types of things that happen. My kids spelled tomorrow that way, I'd be quite frustrated myself. How many of you recall when the West York mayor responded to the controversial Facebook posts? I'm not going to ask if anyone's from West York. I'm not calling this out. I just think it's not calling you out. I'm just saying that this was a very egregious example. And it's a very sensitive one. And I would go so far as to say he definitely did not use common sense. Moving day at the White House has finally arrived. Guns didn't kill 6 million Jews, but their government did. This was scary stuff. He then resigned. And divisive and deplorable is how it was called out. So, you know, we do see these things in Pennsylvania, folks, and we do need to be mindful of them For some of you in the room who may have had to deal with this incident yourselves, you know that it sparks a sense of, you know, a little bit of a bellyache, as you will. Michigan firefighter fired after racist Facebook comments about Black Lives Matter. F Black Lives Matter. You're the epitome of a N, and if you think it's just Black lives, kiss my and go back to the fields. I can't even continue reading it. It's so wrong, right? We're all saying it's so wrong, but this is what happens on social media. Everybody has their opinions and their biases. So we do have to monitor. As much as I started out this program with you need to be here, you also need to monitor it, because these are real examples. Local governments should work with their IT staff to ensure that their social media policy includes necessary policies regarding security of data. That's really important, as we've seen in recent weeks with data breaches and increases to cybersecurity, which I was just asked, what's the #1 risk facing all businesses today in a media interview? And I said, cybersecurity by far. By far. And if you think you're not targeted, you are. I'm a small 8-person marketing and public relations agency in Doylestown, and my website was hacked. Okay? Now, it was a few years ago. Unfortunately, we caught it quickly. But by all means, we are all at risk. So make sure you involve anybody who handles your IT. And if you're using your neighbor's nephew to do your website, and your website is connected to your social media, and even if it's not, you need to make sure your website is protected. Because I can tell you, we do municipal websites. I've done municipal websites, and I know where they're coming from, and they're not protected. They don't have the right security protocols in place, oftentimes. And the last thing you want is somebody hacking your website, hacking into your social media, and then wreaking havoc on your entity. So include the guidelines regarding security of data and and make sure that they address password security. So for example, one of the things we do, anytime an employee leaves our firm or an employee of our client leaves that has access to the website backend, to social media profiles, all of the passwords are immediately changed. It is protocol, not, oh, well, I don't really think we can trust that. It's okay. You know, we'll get to it. No. Everything is changed. Doesn't matter if I trust the person or not, because I don't know where their computer is going to be and if that information is accessible on there and if somebody else is going to have access. So this is the type of protocol you want to put in place for your social media as well. Very important. I mean, these are minor things, by the way, because not everyone's going to have access to administer, to be the administrator of these things. So make sure you have that in place as well. And then, of course, the intellectual property piece. This is not minor. A lot of people don't think about it, but when you're posting content, if it's not owned by your entity, at least giving ownership credits. So in other words, a photographer came to your event and took photos. If you don't own the rights to the photos, you need to say, thanks, you know, put the courtesy of so-and-so. Don't go on Google and do Google Images and screenshot something and then call it your own. I see this all the time. It's so easy to create images if you want images. There's if anybody's a little tech savvy, just a little bit, there's an application called Canva, C-A-N-V-A. I use it all the time to create a lot of these images that you see in here. I am not a graphic designer. I can't design much at all, but I can create these things using these tools if I don't want to engage my graphic designer in the office for the statistics, for those types of things. And it's easy, but we're creating them. So make sure it's an original or attributed. Another big area that we see is defamation that comes up with social media. And this is a big fear of many municipalities, many entities for that matter. So I want to define it just a little bit. I like this image to define defamation. Is it a false statement of fact and published? You're claiming it's fact, but it's false, and it's published. If it's published and of public concern, and it's negligent, and there's damage. So look at the way this goes, right, with your arrows. Then it's considered libel, no knowledge of falsity, malicious. I haven't seen a lot of this in the municipal setting, but it's something that you want to address in your policies to say not to post a false statement. It has to be verifiable, that's malicious, those types of things. And just people need to know that. And you want to protect your entity. And then, of course, privacy. Who can view the profile? Who can post comments and other content on the profile? Who can search for social media? All of this is regulated. When you set up a profile, you can set up all of these parameters. And a lot of people, it's actually easy to do when you first set it up, and it's easy to do after it's set up. You just have to know how to get there. And if you don't know how to get there, what can you do? Really loud, everybody, come on, wake up. Google it! I know this is a lot of information, but truthfully, you can Google it. There's so many presentations that I give that I just literally give the link to the Google explanation on how to do it, because they can do it better than I can. So these are some of the things that you want to be aware of in terms of privacy. And with everything you do, with every email, with every post, just assume that it's public. Every internal statement and email you write, assume that it's public. Just did crisis for a company out in Utah, and we had to write an internal statement to their 400 employees. And I explained to the CEO that this statement, while internal, was being written for the media, because I was assuming it was going to be leaked. I'm not a skeptic. I'm just assuming it's going to be leaked, because that's how I'm going to protect it. Everything, assume it's public. And then, how are you going to handle legal compliance? The policies need to include compliance language. They need to be applicable to federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and policies. So again, why you want to get your solicitors involved. By the way, solicitors get very mad if I don't say that. Be aware of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act and how it applies. Whether or not you have retention and preservation requirements. And you always comply with the social media platform policies, which, by the way, means not having two of the same profile. So a lot of people back when used to go on Facebook and they create a personal profile and then a business profile of themselves. That's a violation of the Facebook policies. Do they enforce it? No, because they want to say they have 10 billion people on there, but that's a whole nother thing. I always want to see the entities that we work with abiding by all platform policies so that they can never be questioned. And then an example of a social media platform policy, this was just last year when LinkedIn, and we're seeing a lot of them right now, in fact. Twitter just sent one out last night that they've updated their policies. Facebook sent one out last week that they updated their policies because of the data mining issue. So we see this regularly, and we're going to see it more and more. A question that often comes up in these programs is, what about social media discussions regarding an action in question and how it relates to the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act? And I pulled a couple of attorneys that I work with who represent municipalities because I really wanted to know their opinion. And of course, most of them are like, don't let them go on social media. And I'm like, well, there's a way to do it safely, you know. So they caution against official two-way dialogue. So depending on your corporate culture, as you will, you may not want to have two-way communication if it's not right in your community yet, if there's not a way to manage it carefully. Others believe it's good practice. So I think I polled about 15 different municipal attorneys last year on that very question, because I really wanted a sense of what would you counsel your municipality to do. And the more conservative, and frankly, the more Republican folks are like, no two-way. And the more liberal are like, no, we want them to communicate, we want them talking. So it was interesting because it literally came down almost on party lines. Yes?
Isn't that more of an issue of making policy versus communicating information?
Yes. So it depends on what you're communicating. So the question was, if I repeat it, is it a matter of policy versus just communicating? And the answer is yes. But we need to be aware of it, because if we're going to use it to communicate policy, and things that are happening in meetings and when votes are coming up and things like that, we do want to be mindful. So that's where we just want to keep it, you know, it can become an issue. So if I didn't give you enough examples of when all goes awry, this was in our own community. The New Hope Soulbury School Board Director blasted by Soulbury supervisors for a Facebook post that reportedly threatened violence. I'm glad some people are wearing safety pins. They might come in handy as a suture for any lacerations you get when you are macro-aggressively punched in the face for being such a slacktivist jackass. I don't know what to say. It's rare that I'm left speechless. This one leaves me speechless. Thank you.